Kyle Shanahan, Jed York, and John Lynch have all spoken from the league meeting. So, what have we learned after what they've said, and what does it mean for the future of the Niners going forward? What is good, everybody? Welcome to the original Gold Standard podcast on the Gold Standard and the Fans First Sports Network. I'm Rob Stats Guerrera. He is Levin Black. It is Wednesday. Hi, Levin.
I did not miss that introduction.
Oh, come on. Why not?
I don't know. I just got to give you crap. That's why.
Yeah, that sounds more like it. Welcome, everybody. Like and subscribe to the video if this is your first time checking us out. I promise you, you will like what you hear, at least from us. Maybe not from John.
Or at least like one half of us.
Yes, me, clearly.
Yeah, they can figure that out.
Uh-huh. So, John Lynch spoke. Kyle Shanahan spoke. Jed York spoke. Kyle spoke for like a long time, for at least a half hour. And I want to say this right off the bat because I'm always tough on this guy and I want to be fair and accurate. I'm very grateful to David Lombardi because he posted the video of Kyle Shanahan on his YouTube channel and he posted the video of Jed York on his YouTube channel. He didn't have to do that. He did, and I am grateful for it. So thank you, David Lombardi. I appreciate that because, you know, we didn't get any video of the John Lynch stuff because the Niners didn't allow it. And there's a lot of confusion about, like, what did he say? Did I see everything he said? I couldn't find a list of, like, all the quotes. So it was very confusing. There was a lot that Kyle specifically said. So it's nice that we have the full record to be able to react to.
Yeah, I don't know why they wouldn't post videos, but that's neither here nor there at this point. But yeah, the Kyle interview was the perfect length. I turned it on as I got in my car, the David Lombardi video, which I put my phone aside and just listened to the audio while I'm driving to work. And it ended as I was pulling into the parking lot of my workplace. So perfect interview by Kyle Shanahan. I appreciate it.
And as this commenter says, apparently Grant did too. So thank you to Grant. I did not see that. I just happened to see David's first. So I stopped looking after that because I had already found a source for it. But if Grant did too, thank you, Grant. Thank you to anyone that did, quite frankly. Some of the stuff Jason and Steph touched on yesterday, a lot of it actually. But there's a couple of things going around that they didn't actually touch on that I think are interesting. The first one, there's one comment that I split into two parts, and it proves to me, number one, that they were cooked going into last year and they had the complete wrong mindset going into 2024. And number two, they have the complete right mindset going into 2025. First, here's Kyle Shanahan talking about what he was thinking going into last year.
We lost the Super Bowl in overtime before last year. That's all anyone can think about. I mean, the offseason, you're not even thinking about. You're thinking about getting to week one. And that's kind of how it was for us last year. We took our shot.
That's not good process, Levin. Wow, we weren't even thinking about the offseason. They were thinking about trying to get back to the Super Bowl. From day one, snap one, it was all about chasing that and getting back to where they were. And that's not how it works. Seasons don't carry over. Every season is a new year, and they didn't treat it like that. They treated it like an extension of 2023.
You don't win in the future by chasing the past. That's as simple as you can put it.
Look at you.
They were chasing the past. They were chasing the two Super Bowls they had lost. They couldn't stomach it. They were constantly looking in the rearview mirror saying, what happened? How are we not a Super Bowl champion team? Rather than looking at what's ahead of them saying, we haven't won shit. Let's go prove it.
What is it with everybody today? Everybody this week swearing up a storm. Thanks very much. But I agree with you. I think that was a perfect way to put it. I don't know. Were you replaced by a pod person that was actually eloquent or what happened? But I do appreciate that.
Well, I had to follow it up with not being eloquent with the S word.
Yeah. So thanks for that. So that stinks. And we know we heard the Brock Purdy comments about how tired the 49ers were going into 2024. And probably the combination of those two things led to part of what we saw, which is a bad 49ers team on the field in 2024. But later in that answer, Kyle revealed the mindset going into 2025. And I think it's the exact correct mindset to have.
This year, it's all about practicing, getting back to just focusing on that, not focusing on trying to make up for a Super Bowl loss, try to make up for anything. It's about becoming the best football team you can be and nothing else.
Now, on the one hand, he's saying that because he doesn't think that they have a team good enough to win the Super Bowl this year. But that should be the mindset every year. Is it's about the grind. It's, that cliche, one day at a time, but it really is that. They're not focused on the Super Bowl. They're not focused on getting the number 1 seed. They have to be focused on every individual that day, doing right that day, and building it, to use a phrase that they seem to know and love, brick by brick.
Oh, you took my line. I was going to say,
Yeah.
not day by day, brick by brick. You don't build a house from the top. You build it from the bottom up. So it shows, I think, that it was time for a reset. You had players and you had coaches that were all looking in the mirror saying, we still have this team. How have we not won? What can we do different than we did then to win? And that's looking backwards. If you're saying, hey, we have this team that we think is Super Bowl champion, but we didn't get it done. Let's look at what we did then and change some things for the better so that we can win now. That's still looking in the rearview mirror. That's saying we're going to do what we did then and just make a couple small tweaks to suddenly be a Super Bowl champion. So I think coaches and players needed a reset. And I think that's 100. I don't think they have any actual belief that they are going to win a Super Bowl this year. I think they can maybe make the playoffs. I do not think Jed York, John Lynch, nor Kyle Shanahan think this is a Super Bowl caliber team.
Yeah, and I agree with that, quite frankly. Now, it doesn't mean they can't win it, but right now, going into the season, yeah, I don't see that mindset as like, we're a Super Bowl team. But I don't care necessarily. Like I've said, get back to the playoffs. Get to the playoffs. Anything can happen. I think they can be a playoff team if they focus and do the right things and concentrate on the right things. Kyle also said this that I thought was interesting, Levin.
I want to get to work more now than I probably have in a long time. I can't wait till our players get back. I feel like we've been away from them too long. Having all January off was different. It was nice to get a little bit more rest, but I know we're itching more to get back to phase 1. I think we'll have a hell of a turnout with all of our guys, just talking to them. And we're ready to get back to work and find a way that we can go into week 1 confident as hell that we can win that game.
Interesting comment from Kyle. I'm ready to get back to work more than I've been in some time. I think the extra time off, not having the playoffs, it sucks, yes, but I think it is kind of rejuvenating everybody.
I think that's a large majority of it, but I do think there's another aspect there. It's the fact that he had all the same players. All right, our offense is get the ball to Christian McCaffrey, get the ball to Debo in the flat, and have Aiyuk running intermediate routes to where if they cheat down too much, we'll hit them over the top. Now, the offense is completely different. He's got to make plans for the assumption Brandon Aiyuk is not out there. He hopefully comes back, but you got to prep for if he's not out there. You got to prep for Debo not being there because he will not be there. And you got to prep for Christian McCaffrey not being there because he could go down at any time. So I think for the first time in a few years, Kyle Shanahan has to kind of redevelop what his main goals are on offense. Obviously his main goal is to score a touchdown. But I'm saying his goals has been get the ball to Christian McCaffrey, get the ball to Debo, get the ball to Brandon Aiyuk. Those have been his 3 main goals for a couple of years now. With all 3 of those guys either gone or unknowns, he's got to create an offense that is, I think, personnel proof, put it that way. It's not about, well, this guy's so good, let's get him the ball. It's about, we're not going to have a star here potentially. Let's figure out how we can get anybody the ball.
Kyle was specifically asked about evolving the offense, and I loved his answer. Here's Kyle.
Yeah, I always try to do that. I always try to study offenses and what people are doing, what we're doing. But most of creativity or stuff that you come up with has to do with not just making stuff up. It has to do with thinking. So when you get certain guys or you get a different guy, it intrigues you a different way. And like when we got Christian, that opened up a lot of stuff. Having George over the years has opened up a lot of stuff. Having a player like Debo adds new ideas and things like that. And We'll see when we go in this draft what that can do, but you always got to try to stay ahead of the game, but you don't just do that with just drawing plays in a napkin. You do that with good players and thinking how to balance them out.
I love that answer because I think when people say Kyle has to evolve the offense, they're thinking of, like he said, drawing plays on a napkin, just coming up with like crazy new plays. And Kyle has consistently said, and I agree, that's not how you make good offense. You make good offense by tailoring the game plan to what the opposing defense that week does. And how do we use our players to hurt them where they're weakest, or how do we take advantage of their rules and put our players in a position to succeed? And I totally agree with that. It's not just coming up with top secret, super secret plays that no one's ever done. We're going to have 6 wide receivers on one side of the field. And, you know, that's not what it is. And that answer to me was refreshing because I feel like I've been trying to express that, and I don't think I've done a good job. And I think Kyle just did it for me.
So somebody else doing your job for you, huh?
Well, you know, look, I've been skating by so far. Why stop?
First won't be the last, huh?
I gotta say, I don't know what's going on with your microphone. It is driving me nuts.
Really?
I don't know if it's not working. I don't know what the deal is. It's driving me nuts. Do me a favor, pop out. I'll read some comments, pop back in because I can't take it anymore. It's driving
Fair
me
enough.
nuts. Sorry, I'm super particular about that. I'm an old radio man at heart, and that just every time he talks, I can't help but think of that. So anyway, let me read some comments. Levin will pop back in, and then we'll keep it rolling here. Hold on. I had a couple starred. We'll get to the Brock Purdy negotiation stuff in a minute. And I want to get to some of what Jed said, too, because he's kind of gaslighting us a little bit. And we're going to get to the draft philosophy stuff. So we got a lot coming up here, but hopefully Levin can get the mic fixed and he'll pop back in here and we'll be good. Vinny V says Kyle's main goal needs to be better on short yardage, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Yes, Rob, doing anything on 4th down. Yeah, my 4th down stance is clear. I think we're all aware of that. The short yardage thing, that's offensive line, really. Like, your offensive line get blocked and dominated in short yardage when the other team knows you're going to run, or do they actually stay in front of their man, don't get beat, and let the running back do their work? And short yardage has been an issue with the 49ers for multiple years because they don't have the most physically talented offensive line. They have been pretty honest about not really looking for the most physically talented offensive line. And most of the time they can be okay with that. But in certain situations, it comes back to bite them. All right, Levin is here. Speak.
I tried a couple different things. First off, it could just be the microphone. I have been thinking about getting a new one. This one has served its purpose, but I also realized I changed things down here. If people haven't noticed, it looks a little different. I'm in the middle of getting this set up as an actual office. I did not have my actual Ethernet plugged in, so I was on Wi-Fi.
I don't know that it's any better, but we're going to power through it. Sorry, it's just my issue. Anyway, let's take more of a listen to what Kyle Shanahan had to say, because there's one comment that he made about the draft that it's the first time I think I ever have seen Jason and Steph lose their minds, and they lost their minds. And it was Kyle talking about the NFL draft.
We've gone into drafts these last few years, not as much last year, but especially the 2 years prior to where you look at, you don't really have to find a starter anywhere. You got to find depth because quickly they're a starter with an injury. I remember going into 3 years ago and felt the only starting position we could find was a kicker because we were so solidified. And it really isn't that way this year. So we're going to go into this draft, hopefully add 11 people. We'll see how that plans out, add them into our OTAs, and hopefully we'll have some really good competition come training camp.
Your reaction?
I understand what he's trying to say. I don't think he did a very good job of saying it. I think he went a little too far with what he said, basically. He said that they assumed they didn't need any starters other than a kicker. I don't think that's true. You know what I mean? I don't think he truly went in to the season saying, we have all our starters. We don't need to draft anybody that's going to be a starter. But I think what he means is they had people on the roster. They were comfortable being the starter if need be, if nobody else beat them out. I think he went too far with it. But yeah, anytime a coach is in April saying, I know my 22 starters, they have probably already destroyed the season.
I think that I agree with you that I don't know that he said what he meant. Just being, following every single press conference Kyle Shanahan has ever given now for going on 9 years, I feel like I know sort of how he speaks and things like that. But it just sure seems like what he said was, yeah, we knew we weren't looking for starters, so the drafts were not as big of a priority, right? Or we weren't really looking for the best players. We were looking for specific things or needs. And it reinforced to me something I've said about this team for a little while now. Once they got to the Super Bowl in 2019 and lost it, they got away from team building and they kept trying to just get the cherry on the sundae. They kept trying to find that one missing piece, that one piece here, that one player there that was going to be enough to push them over the top because they were going to get back to the Super Bowl and win it. And they got away from some of their core philosophies and some of their just team building in general, where the roster was so bad in 2017 and so bad in 2018 that they were like, we just need good players. We'll take them anywhere we think we can get them. 5th round, 3rd round, whatever. Just bring them in. And they stopped doing that. And that's why their draft stunk from, basically 2021 to 2023. They really haven't gotten a ton out of any of those drafts. I think last year they started to get back to team building. And that's why their draft last year was one of the best they've had, in recent year, probably since 2019.
I got another analogy for you. You ever go to one of those like yogurt places where you got like this smorgasbord of toppings and you make it yourself? You get a little bit of frozen yogurt and then you pick all your toppings.
Mm-hmm.
The yogurt is the main story. But sometimes, especially for the inexperienced, they get so obsessed with all the toppings that they put so many different things on there that there's way too many different flavors. And they forget about what the main point is. The main point is to have the best players. You get good players. That's the main point of any team. But they had so many toppings on there that you couldn't taste the yogurt anymore. You were tasting the crunched up Butterfinger and the M&Ms and the brownie bites and the hot fudge. They had so many things on there because they lost sight of the main thing. The main thing is the frozen yogurt.
That's another pretty good analogy. Not going to lie. Have to give you a little
You
bit.
may not have a daughter that loves to go to the ice cream place where I get to pick my toppings.
My son always goes gummy bears. I can't believe it. I'm not a
She loves the like little, I can't stand them. The little balls filled with like juice of flavor.
Gushers?
They're kind of like gushers. They're like boba tea type of things, but it's not tea. Obviously, it's like sugary juice inside of them. I hate those things.
Yeah,
but that's what she wants. I want some of each kind.
Can't get obsessed with the toppings. I agree. Keep the main thing, as Brock Purdy said. But it was just a stunning comment for Kyle to make. And it was just, the draft is always about team building. Always. It doesn't matter if you won the Super Bowl or you have the first pick. It's always about team building. The draft is the foundation. Where you do sort of cherry pick, that's free agency. That's what free agency is for. I know it comes before the draft, so it's kind of annoying. But that's the, hey, we missed in the draft at linebacker, so now we have to go sign a free agent linebacker. Or, hey, our team is really good, but we didn't have this. Well, you go out in free agency where the players are proven, you know exactly what you're buying, and you get that thing, right? The draft, it's a crapshoot. You don't know, so you have to use it to build your team. And the 49ers got away from that, and I think it has bitten them in the ass. So it was nice to sort of hopefully see if 2024 is any indication that they are getting back to that, because I think they need to.
Yeah, I do think they need to. I'm a firm believer in you always take the best player available in the draft. And like you said, free agency is where you have desperation. I don't want desperation in the draft. I don't want you going in saying, who we're really light at this position. That's what we definitely have to take. No, go in, take the best player available, find them some playing time, and then in free agency and in trade market, that's where you're desperate. That's where you say, we really need to address this position. Let's get him no matter what. You know what I mean? You don't wait around, obviously, for him to say, oh, I don't know, get an offer from the Denver Broncos and then fly in and try to convince him to come to the 49ers. But you're proactive. You say, look, we're going to overpay by $1 million, $1.5 million a year for this one free agent because we absolutely need him. I would rather have that desperation than say the desperation of, wow, we really need a defensive tackle. Let's take Javon Kinlaw.
Well, the scary thing is, it seems like they have positioned themselves this year to have to sort of draft for need and say, oh, shoot, we need 4 defensive linemen. Now we have to pick defensive linemen. So it's going to be really interesting to see how much they draft for need, later this month. Or do they have the right mindset, which is just take as many good players as you can, even though it might mean not addressing certain needs, which, I mean, how everybody was screaming last year, right? When they took Ricky Pearsall in the first round. Oh my God, you need an offensive lineman. What are you doing? But the 49ers did not pigeonhole themselves into only drafting for need. They took, in their estimation, the best players that were there. And for the most part, they were rewarded for that. So it'll be interesting to see now this year, do they do the same thing? What if they only come away with, one defensive lineman in the first 2 days?
Then they'll go to the post free agency market.
Mm-hmm.
And they hinted at that when he was asked about Calais Campbell, and he said, we'll see where we're at after the draft. So that tells you, well, they hope to get a defensive lineman at number 11, but if not, then they're going to probably look to get some depth from the leftover free agency market.
And Calais Campbell is now back in the NFC West, back in Arizona. Don't love that, because I think he's a solid player and could have been a good contributor for them, even though I think he's like 37 or 38, but
I think he's 39.
Wow, he's playing at a very high level still.
He's one of the strongest players of all time.
Some of those
I put Larry Allen above him, and after that, I don't know.
Dude is getting it done big time. So we'll see him twice a year, unfortunately. One more thing Kyle said, kind of talking about the draft, that is both good and bad.
Going into this season, going into OTAs, going into training camp, I do feel there will be as much competition on our team for starting spots as there has been in a while, especially on defense. But we kind of want to create that everywhere. We haven't had that for a while.
Now, the good news is I always love competition. Let everybody compete for their spot every year. The bad news is he's saying that because the talent and the players on the roster just aren't there like they have been in the past.
Yeah, it's, hey, we have crap. We have a bunch of players on our roster that couldn't be starters before. We're hoping they suddenly rise to being a starter now. That's what that's saying.
Like literally at one point, Matt Barrow says to Kyle, other than Nick Bosa, is there an obvious starter on this defensive line? And Kyle laughs and he's like, yeah, I think there is, pretty clearly. And Matt was like, really? Who is it? And Kyle was like, oh, well, I'll let you figure it out. And it's like, no, there really isn't an obvious starter on the line other than Nick Bosa.
No, there's not. There's not an obvious defensive end option at all on the defensive line other than Nick Bosa. Like, I don't know what their plan is there. I feel like they are going to go into the season basically having a bunch of young people, hope one of them rises.
Mm-hmm.
If they are in contention, say 500 or better around the trade deadline, and none of those guys have emerged, they'll say, all right, there's always a pass rusher or two in the trade market. We'll go get one of them. I feel like that's their plan. Their plan is to go into the season not betting on this season, and by trade deadline, they will decide whether or not they want to bet on it.
Maybe. And, maybe that's their plan, to say, if we start off good and we really think we got something here, then we can always add during the season. Okay. But, you can't just snap your fingers and make a trade. You obviously got to get someone else to disagree with you. It's a lot more complicated than simply signing a guy as a free agent. Although, as you said, apparently that became a lot more complicated because it seems like they completely botched things with Dre Greenlaw.
They did what they always did, and I think Dre Greenlaw has said no. And, what they did was, we're not going to do anything. We're going to sit on our hands until the 11th hour and 59 minutes, and then we'll show up and give you what you deserve the whole time. Like, no. If I'm the players, I do the same thing. I say, if I was a player like Brock Purdy, for instance, I would be going public saying, you sign me before training camp starts, or you will not be signing me. I am not going to be like everybody else that sits here and waits for you to finally come to the table. You come to the table now, or you get the heck out, and I will go somewhere else at the end of my career.
The interesting thing that Kyle said, which we played, was he said how he thinks a lot of guys are going to show up for phase 1 of OTAs after talking with them.
Yeah, a month off does that.
I wonder if the 49ers know that Brock's not going to hold out, that he's going to show up for all the stuff. And as I've said, if he shows up for all the stuff, Levin, it doesn't matter if he has a contract or not.
No, not really. I mean, technically there's a small risk of injury, but I wouldn't say it's any more than, it's not like if he doesn't show up, he's going to be sitting on his couch at home. No, he's going to still be doing workouts, and that's all OTAs is a workout. But I think for Brock, it's a weird spot because I don't think he ever cares to hold out and be that guy.
Right.
But at the same time, he's dealing with a team that unless you do that, they're not going to pay you. And I do think that there is a reputation damage that has happened here. They've done it one too many times, or maybe 2 or 3 too many times for the 49ers, to where players are saying, I'm not waiting on you. And that's what happened with Dre Greenlaw. He said, I'm not waiting on you. You want to show up now and offer me more money? Dre Greenlaw turned down more money from the 49ers because it was a lack of respect. They didn't want to negotiate with him. They gave him a crap offer before free agency. He went out and got a free agency offer. And then they say, well, yeah, we think you're worth more than that. So here's your money. No, you could have done that a month ago. You could have done that 2 months ago. That's the problem. Like, I think players are done with it.
And I believe it was already after he had agreed to a deal with the Broncos. So part of it too is like, I just gave my team, this team, my word that I would join them. It's just a backwards way of doing business. Like, you don't, especially for someone that all they do is sing Dre Greenlaw's praises. And I'm sure that they're not lying. I'm sure they do love him, but it's like, then that's not the way you treat a player. I know that like people have said, oh, the Niners offered more money in the end. Well, as Vish pointed out on Monday, like, okay, more money, how? More guaranteed money? More money with contract incentive? Like, technically, we don't even know the ins and outs of that. So technically, it could have been more, but it might have been a worse contract. It might have been less guaranteed money. We don't know. But the point of the matter is, the Broncos went out and showed Dre Greenlaw love. They said, you're a priority. We're going after you, and we want you to come here and be Michael Jordan on this team. And the 49ers said, yeah, go ahead. We'll talk to you maybe. And then, wait, what? The Broncos offered him a deal? All right, well, let's go and try and get him back. And then they don't. How do you think Robert Saleh felt about that, by the way?
Yeah, probably not very good. There are 2 players that if I was in their shoes, I know what I would be doing. I'm curious if you think it would be a good thing, because I think they should do it. Like I said, this is the 49ers rep. If I'm George Kittle, I go in that offense and I draw the line in the sand and say, you will re-sign Brock Purdy, or I will not do another deal with you, and I will go elsewhere for the end of my career. If I'm Fred Warner, I would be kicking the door off its hinges when Dre Greenlaw was lost, saying, you effed up, change your ways, or I will not sign another contract until you start paying people when they deserve to be paid and stop playing these games of holdouts. I will not be signing a new contract. Like, that's, I would like to see the true veterans on this team flex their power, because there is some power there. And those 2 players specifically, like Nick Bosa going in there and doing that, doesn't hold almost any weight, because they go, okay, oh darn, we only have you for 3 or 4 more years. It doesn't hold the same weight. But Fred Warner and George Kittle are at the point where they might get new deals this offseason. Like, I would imagine there's some talks going on, so that's when they have their power.
Yeah, I mean, Kittle, they clearly want to get a deal done with Kittle. He's talked about it. They've talked about it. And look, what you're talking about does happen. It just happened in Cincinnati. T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. T. Higgins fired his agent and hired Jamar Chase's agent. And then the agent was like, guess what? If you want Jamar Chase, that doesn't happen unless you also sign T. Higgins. And then it was like an ultimate leverage play. And what happened? Cincinnati did sign both of those guys. So,
and Joe Burrow also went public, basically saying, I want them both back.
Yeah, that's true too. And players have some power and some flexibility, and they flex their muscle, and ultimately it worked out for Cincinnati. We'll see what happens with Kittle and Brock too, of course. Becca, 49ers Giants Sharks, new YouTube channel. Oh, not new, excuse me. Member for 12 months. Thank you very much for supporting the channel. Becca says, all I ever hear from Jed York's mouth is BS. Let's get to a little Jed York from the league meetings, Levin. I got to tell you, every time I hear him talk, he drives me nuts. Just listen to this. This is the first question and answer from Jed York at the league meetings.
Jed, what role did you play in the cost-cutting measures, or at least the cash cutback this offseason?
All right. Sorry. First of all, that question it's bananas from Matt Maiocco. What role did you play in? He's the owner. This didn't just happen to Jed York. He is the owner. I cannot stand, Levin, the kowtowing and tiptoeing around Jed York like he's, the Emperor Palpatine here. Like, he's not going to zap you with force lightning if you ask a question he doesn't like. What are we doing? What role did you play in the reduction of the spending? The only role.
I'll just say this. Like, I read the transcript of the Jed York interview, so I didn't have to deal with that. But I listened to the Kyle Shanahan interview, and the thought that kept popping in my head was, holy hell, journalists know how to ask a question. And that's not just to the 49ers media, because there was national media there, obviously talking to Kyle Shanahan too. But I was driven mad because part of this was kind of like my thing as a journalist that I took very seriously. But in an interview like that, where it's pre-planned, it's not, like a game, you can get a good bit of like exactly how you want to ask a question done. But there's a little bit of a time crunch. You have had months to come up with your questions for Kyle Shanahan. Literally months.
And Jed.
The amount of questions that were phrased in a way that it's a yes, no, which, by the way, is literally journalism 101. I'm not kidding you. That is one of the very first things I learned in journalism 101. When doing an interview, never ask or phrase a question in a way that is a yes or no answer. Make it be open-ended so that they're forced to talk, that they can't just say yes or no and move on if they want to be a jerk and not truly answer what you're meaning. Luckily, Kyle Shanahan didn't do that. But I was struck by literally, I would say 3 out of 4 questions, they phrased it in 3 and 4. But the part that really stuck with me and bothered the crap out of me, probably as much as my mic is bothering you today, if not more, is they were constantly tiptoeing and saying, and trying to figure out a way to phrase it just right to where they didn't piss off Kyle Shanahan. Okay. When I did interviews like that, I had my questions, it was like writing a story. I wrote them down ahead of time. I went through, I edited them. I picked out the exact wording I wanted to use so that it was the perfect wording to try to get them kind of backed into a corner where they're forced to give the truth. The fact that they just wing it all, I don't understand it. You have had months to come up with your questions. What are you doing? Why are you saying and struggling to figure out a way to put it into words what you're asking? There were questions that were literally 2 sentences long that took a minute to ask because there was so much thinking about how do I want to say this, and they're using to buy them time. I don't get it, and to me, it's extremely unprofessional. I will say a lot of that was the national media, but there was some of that. The yes no things, like Maiocco asked a couple of yes no questions. I can't remember if Grant did one. Some of the voices I couldn't quite place. I knew it was an NFL person or a 49ers person, but I couldn't remember exactly who it was. But the 49ers were doing the yes no questions. The NFL media was doing I have no idea how I want to ask this.
First of all, Eric Branch never asked a question in less than 30 seconds in his life, which drives me nuts. Real quick, super chat from Ryan Aloy says, name another team that has a Parag or a Parag-like figure that has as much power or more power as the GM or head coach. I'll wait. Parag's negotiation style hurts the team more often than helps. I completely agree. It's Parag. He's the one that tries to win every negotiation and then gets his ass handed to him because he never does. It's happened over and over again. It happened with Bosa. It happened with Trent. It happened with Kittle. It happened with name a guy, Christian McCaffrey. They always lose the negotiations. That's why it never made sense to me that, they're blaming Kyle Shanahan's emotional outbursts for their bad contracts when it's Parag that has really bit them in the ass. But okay.
Parag can stay in England. I'm at that point. He can stay in England. Honeymoon's over. There was a time period 15 years ago, I thought he was awesome. Yeah, that's not the case anymore.
Every team has a salary cap guy. Like the idea that he's some irreplaceable guy is like
he's just one of the few that got known that
right.
the media has talked about.
Exactly. So I'm completely in agreement there. All right. Let me play the question again, and then we'll listen to Jed York's answer.
Jed, what role did you play in the cost-cutting measures, or at least the cash cutback this offseason?
I think my uncle played more of a measure by instituting the salary cap from his spending. It's just a math thing, right? Like when you sit down with your guys and figure out where do you want to go, what do you want to build, and you make the decision that you want to pay a quarterback that has obviously been underpaid for his first 3 seasons in the NFL. When you make that change, you have to make sacrifices somewhere. It's a decision that we made collectively, and we're hoping that we make somebody the highest paid player in the history of our franchise. And that was a decision that we made, I mean, probably in the middle of the season.
So, okay, couple different things there. First of all, we made this decision collectively. No, you made the decision to stop spending, Jed. You made the decision that if you're going to pay Brock Purdy, then you can't pay anybody else, which is crazy because the Eagles have done the complete up. They've paid Jalen Hurts, and then they paid A.J. Brown, and then they paid Devontae Smith, and then they just signed a linebacker this offseason. They just gave Saquon Barkley the highest contract of any running back in the history of the entire NFL. This idea that, we have to pay Brock Purdy, so we got to cut all these guys is wrong. And again, they were not in trouble cap-wise. Even with a new deal for Brock Purdy, they were not in trouble cap-wise at all. And Levin, I just saw that in 2029, the NFL, I think 2028 or 2029, the NFL is going to opt out of their media deals and sign new media deals and make even more money, which means the cap is going to go up by even more than it's been going up by. So that would have been normally when Brock Purdy's contract, the cap hits would start to kick in. Well, guess what? The cap's going to go up even more then. So that Jed York is gaslighting us. He is absolutely gaslighting us.
Jed York is full of crap, as your commenter said. There is not almost anything he said in that press conference that wasn't a crock of crap. I'm not kidding. So you brought up the Eagles, and I was going to wait for that because that was the comment where I read it and I said, did he really say that? That's literally the number one example against his argument. What are you talking about? He went on to say that, yes, I know the Eagles just won the Super Bowl after paying Saquon Barkley and making that big move in free agency, but you can't do that when you have to pay your quarterback. It's like, they paid Jalen Hurts the year before. What are you talking about? They have one of the most expensive quarterbacks in the league, and they still went out and said, we are overspending to get this running back. We don't care. And guess what? It worked out. They won the Super Bowl. But he brought it up as an example of that, it's an outlier because they didn't pay their quarterback. Yes, they have. What are you talking about? Are you that out of touch? If you're that out of touch, then stay the hell away from the team for good. Just sit back and count your money. Don't get involved. If you're that dense and dumb and don't understand that they've paid their quarterback already, then you don't belong in that building.
Oh, he knows, but he's trying to tell a story. He's gaslighting us because he knows he's not going to get any pushback.
Yeah, he's doing the new trend of I'm just going to lie and enough people will believe it.
Well, and he's not going to get any pushback. I mean, God, if you heard the way Mayelko tiptoed in that thing, like you could tell they're not pushing back to the point of Levin. He said later in the session, well, you remember those Mike Nolan and those Mike Singletary defenses. They were unbelievable was the word he used. No, they weren't. Mike Nolan's first year, the defense was 30th in points and last in yards. The second year, they were 32nd in points, dead last, and 26th in yards. The year after that, they were 20th in points and 25th in yards. They weren't unbelievable. Like, he's not even living in the universe of the reality about his own football team. So he's not going to live in the reality of the finances. He doesn't want to spend money, and that's why he's doing this. He was asked, what effect does the soccer ownership have on the 49ers? One, he denied that they're about to get another soccer team. And two, he said it's completely separate was the words he used. Quote, completely separate.
That was the next thing I was going to get to. Yeah, that's BS. Okay, so let me give you a very good example. I work for a company called MPLX. That stands for Marathon Logistics because the parent company is Marathon. Guess who decides our procedures and our policies? Marathon. Marathon owns a ton of companies. We are just one of them under their envelope. But guess what happens when they report their income? It all gets put into the same SEC filing and 10K filing, where all of that money is Marathon, because the parent owner is the one that ends up having all the money come into one pot. The 49ers are the parent owner. 49ers Enterprises, if you want to get specific to the company.
Right.
So what Leeds spends comes out of the York's pocketbook. What the 49ers spend comes out of the York's pocketbook. The reports are the 49ers aren't spending because the Yorks don't want to spend cash. Okay, that means Leeds spending cash, which they are going to spend obscene amount of cash because they just got promoted to the Premier League. That means you have to spend a couple $100 million in hopes of staying in the Premier League. They are part of the same, like you can't have two companies owned by the same person and say they're different. I don't care if it was completely separate from each other. Like, say somebody owned a company that sells cleaning supplies, and then he also owns a company that does commercial flooring. Guess what? I use that example because that's the company that my dad was vice president of growing up. There was a guy who owned a commercial flooring business that did a bunch of buildings for Purdue and bigger buildings down in Indianapolis. And he also owned a cleaning supplies where he sold like a warehouse where he was the distributor for all these like cleaning supplies. But it all went into his one owner's pocketbook, and those two companies affected each other. Even though they were technically completely separate, if they have the same principal owner, they are tied together.
It's like me trying to say, oh, well, Gold Standard Productions, which is my LLC, Gold Standard Productions is totally separate from Rob Guerrera. Totally, completely separate. It's like, yeah, on paper, but guess what? I own Gold Standard Productions. So.
To put it better, it's like saying Gold Standard Productions doesn't affect your wife.
Right, yeah.
Like, somebody has nothing to do with Gold Standard Productions. Basically, I mean, she's married to you, so she has something to do with it. But she doesn't have any role with Gold Standard Productions.
Right. And yeah.
Yet she is affected by Gold Standard Productions finances.
So it was a ridiculous answer from Jed York. But again, no pushback. Nope. Okay, that's what he says. So that's what must be true. No pushback at all. Daza0187, YouTube channel member. Thank you, Daza. Nice super chat says, not paying some of their players didn't bother me that much except for Dre if he was healthy. I agree with you. But not going after Drew Dahlman or Azeez Ojulari, who were signed to very manageable contracts, is frustrating. That is the frustration. People are when you get frustrated about what the 49ers haven't done this offseason, people say, whoa, did you want them to overpay for Banks and all those guys? No one did. It's not about who they let go for the most part. It's about what they didn't bring in to replace those guys. That is where the frustration lies.
Yeah, they basically said, we're going to get rid of a bunch of people and not replace them with anybody. Like, count how many people they've let go that are on new teams and how many draft picks they have. I guarantee they don't have enough draft picks to fill all those spots, right. Meaning they're going to have to go into free agency at some point. They're just waiting until all the good players are gone.
All the expensive players, really. That's part of it too. They're shopping at the bargain bin. So yeah, Jed York said a bunch of different things. I thought it was interesting. People have been talking about this. In one of his answers, he referred to Brock Purdy as a top 10 quarterback. And then someone said, wait a minute. So are you saying Brock Purdy is a top 10 quarterback? And Jed said, yes, I think he's great, especially when you pair him with what Kyle Shanahan can do. I know that Mike Florio immediately jumped on that as like, all right, your owner is literally calling him top 10. If you look at the top 10 quarterbacks in terms of salaries, they're all making more than $50 million. So you basically just admitted you have to pay Brock Purdy $50 million a year.
Yeah, I think everybody knows that. Brock's not going to sign for less. Like, why would he sign for, as you said, something that's outside the top 10? That makes no sense. Name a quarterback that is believed to be the franchise's starting long-term quarterback that signs for outside top 10 money. There is not one.
I agree. And people are like making a big deal out of the fact that he said he's top 10. Like, I think Brock views himself as a top 10 quarterback. And that's what people don't get. I think that people think of Brock Purdy as this all shucks humble guy who is just going to be grateful that the 49ers are going to give him a contract at all. No, Brock thinks Brock is awesome. And I don't mean that to disparage him at all. I'm just saying he's a confident player. He should think that way. Every NFL player should think that way. Brock is not going to just be happy to be getting a big money contract with the 49ers. He's going to want a contract that's in the top 10, like you said. That means $50 million a year. And I find it really interesting, Levin, that, you know, Brock Purdy seems to be the quarterback with a lot of people in the national media that all of a sudden they want to push back on, right? They all acknowledge like, hey, players, when their contracts are up, don't necessarily get money in accordance with their skill level. They get the market rate, even if they're not necessarily the best player, like Kirk Cousins did when he was a free agent multiple times, got a fully guaranteed contract, all that stuff. Like Trevor Lawrence got when he signed with the Jaguars. Like, people have acknowledged that that's the way it works. But with Brock Purdy, now everybody wants to put their foot down and say, well, you know, just because you're a free agent, just because your contract's up doesn't mean you should get a market rate. And it's really weird that all of a sudden Brock is the guy that everybody wants to enforce that with, not anyone, Tua Tagovailoa, Trevor Lawrence, any of those other guys.
Yeah, it's weird. They usually do that with the black quarterback, like the guy in Baltimore, when they said nobody should be interested in him. Yeah, I went there. Sorry. But it's all BS. We know what the drill is. $55 million is Brock taking a team-friendly deal. Let's be honest. Him taking anything less than 60 is him getting less than what he can demand.
And I think that people, I said this going into the offseason. I said, if you decide you don't want to pay Brock Purdy, that's fine. I can get behind that. But if you decide you're going to pay him, then you have to pay the market rate. That has to go into your decision making. You can't say, well, we want to give him $40 million a year. That's never going to happen. So if they didn't want to pay the $50 million a year, okay. Trade Brock Purdy, take some draft picks, and you move on. Mac Jones is there now. If that's what they want to do, whatever. But my point is, you make that decision and you run with it. But if you've already decided that he's your guy, which Jed York said that they decided halfway through last year, he is the guy, then stop mucking around. Just pay the market rate, because he's not going to take less than that. It's not like if the 49ers wait 6 months from now, Brock Purdy's going to say, oh, you know what? Actually, I will take $40 million. That's never going to happen.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. Look, I would be more for this scenario than just not playing Brock and trying to buy time and all that. I would be more for them doing complete teardown and saying, you know what? We're going to tank this year because next year's quarterback class might be one of the best of all time. I would be fine if they said, you know what? We're going to trade Brock, get the draft compensation we can get. You know, and we're going to trade any of the other veterans that have trade value that don't want to be here. You know, like if Kittle's okay staying, I probably wouldn't trade him. If Fred Warner's okay staying, I probably wouldn't trade him. But if they say, if you're tanking this year, I want out, then I would do right by those guys because they deserve it. But I would be more in favor of a full teardown than the playing the middle game of, well, we're not going to fully commit and we're willing to pay him, but not really pay him. No, change the atmosphere, because I do think they're creating this atmosphere of it doesn't matter how good I do, they are going to fight wanting to pay me, and I don't think that is good for morale. It's you go into a season, you want to feel it's that way with any workplace environment other than like yours where you're self-employed, so it doesn't matter because you don't get to choose to pay yourself more. But in a normal workplace environment, whether it's my job or somebody else's job or the NFL, you want to show up to work under the thought that if I go above and beyond, if I do a great job, I will be rewarded. I will get a pay raise. I will get what I deserve. And I think that's what the 49ers have. I would say it's probably been created at this point. I don't think it's beyond repair. I think it can be repaired pretty quickly. Like if Brock signs this week, I think that goes a long way. But I think they've started to create somewhat of a toxic environment where players feel like it doesn't matter how good I do, they aren't going to pay me unless I play the media game and I hold out going through training camp, which then hurts my ability to play well that following season. So no matter what, I either don't get paid what I deserve, or I put my reputation on the line because I didn't get training camp.
People want to be paid when they perform. That's why I haven't given you a raise in about a year. And yes,
Okay.
I waited for you to be done talking just so I could say that.
Haven't done the monthly payroll yet.
They do ultimately pay their people, but it's just, it seemingly is always a fight. Now, Jed did say a lot of nice things about Brock. He said that Brock's been underpaid for years. He told Mike Garafolo that there were guys in NIL making more money than Brock Purdy, which is probably true. But they have sort of positioned him in a weird spot. They have very clearly said, Jed York said, quote, "We knew that we had to make sacrifices around the roster to make sure that you can pay a quarterback. It's just math." So they've positioned Brock. It's his fault that we're letting all these guys go and that we're not signing anybody because we had to make sacrifices to pay a quarterback. They are clearly putting that on Brock Purdy. And the fact that they have already cut those guys and not signed people before the Brock contract is even done, they are really putting it on Brock Purdy.
Before they've even truly come to the table. I've not heard that the Niners have made a new offer yet. The report was that they made some lowball offer and they haven't done anything since. Now, granted, that info is probably about a month old at this point. Haven't heard much of an update. I think it's very clear that there is a certain level of respect between the two sides, as well as it's very clear that Brock Purdy has said, I don't want to play the game out in the media because his agent hasn't leaked anything. Like, we know very little about this negotiation. But we do know what the 49ers MO is. They're probably not going to be actually making a legitimate offer until sometime after the draft.
This is the quote from Jed York that stuck out to me. He said, "I think contract talks have been good. It's not conversations that I'm having. He's got to make a decision with what he wants to do. I don't think we're that far apart. I think we can sit down and get something done. Whenever he's ready, we're ready." I don't totally know what that means, Levin. He's got
to take a guess.
What does that mean? He's got to make a decision with what he wants to do. Does that mean we have an offer out there and he's got to decide if he wants to take it? And we've told him that this is the offer and it's not changing. So he's got to decide if he wants to take our offer or play on his rookie deal. Is that what it means?
I would say it probably means that they've given him two offers. One is with a lot of guarantees, but at a lower AAV, average annual value. And one that has less guarantees, but gets him the AAV that makes it look like he won. You know, something like maybe they've given him a bunch of guarantees where he gets like 3 solid years of guarantees, but it's only like $52 million a year on average. And then something that's $60 million a year, but you're getting 1 year guaranteed for sure. You know what I mean? To where he has to make the decisions. Do I believe in myself and I'll take the 60 million? Or do I want to take the guaranteed money that when I sign it, people are going to say, wow, that's a team-friendly deal?
It would be interesting if they sort of laid out two contract structures in front of him and said, pick whichever one of these you want. And that's the decision they're waiting on. And then once Brock decides, hey, I want structure A or structure B, then we can sit down because we're not far apart and haggle out the actual money. But I don't know why Brock's side would be hesitating, right? Like, because if you're Brock, you want to get paid as soon as possible because you want your money. You want that sweet, sweet signing bonus from Jed York.
Well, the way that I explained it is very simple, but contracts are extremely complicated. So there's all kinds of like little language in there where it's not that Brock hasn't decided which one he wants. It's that there's language in both, or I don't like this language here. There's not enough injury guarantees in either one of these, or I don't like that you're restricting me from being able to operate heavy machinery on my farm in the offseason in this contract. Like, they can get very complicated and very specific. So it could be that he's trying to work those things out of the deal before he tips his hand of, I want this deal.
Could be. That very well could be. It's really the difference with this one is it doesn't seem to be getting contentious, but it's the amount of gaslighting and stuff that's going on around the deal and the way that they have the national people sort of parroting their talking points drives me crazy. I'm seeing something. Brad Graham just tweeted something out from the Dan Patrick show. So let's take a listen to this. I don't totally know what it says, but this is Dan Patrick talking about Brock Purdy.
Do you think Brock Purdy's career from this point on will get better or worse?
Ooh, that's a good question. First, let's answer that ourselves, Levin. Will his career from this point on get better or worse?
In terms of what?
I don't know. In terms of...
There's two different versions of that. Is he going to be better than he was 2 years ago? That might be the high side for him statistically. Is he going to be better than he was last year? Absolutely. Or are you talking team success?
Right.
Which means you're basically asking, is he going to win a Super Bowl? Well, I think if that's the question you're asking, then I don't care to have this conversation because that's a stupid conversation to have. You don't have conversations of, do I think this quarterback can win a Super Bowl title? Do I think he can? Yeah. But if you're asking, is he going to be better than what he was, i.e. have more success? I can't answer that. Winning a Super Bowl is somewhat of a crapshoot unless you're one of the all-time greats like Mahomes.
I mean, he went NFC Championship game as a rookie, then Super Bowl, and then obviously last year missed the playoffs. But it's hard to – that's a very high bar to meet when you say, is your career going to get better? Like you said, the only thing that's left at that point is a Super Bowl victory. Here's more from Dan Patrick.
Worse. Yeah. Got rid of Debo. I think they put themselves in salary cap hell with Brandon Aiyuk's contract.
They didn't.
That they can't trade him. How much longer does Williams play? George Kittle, how long does he play? McCaffrey, how long does he play? And then you got to go out and find those guys. Well, you have to find those guys, and you also have a quarterback making $55 million a year.
And other than,
all right. So let's that's such an easy thing to say, especially for a national talk show host. And look, I am a national talk show host. Okay. I was literally on ESPN radio last weekend or 2 weeks ago on their national show. So I know of what I speak. I produce national radio shows as well. It's such an easy thing to say. Well, McCaffrey's getting old. Kittle's getting old. Debo's gone. Yes, those guys are going to come and go, but they're going to get new people. And at least Dan did acknowledge that. And of course, yeah, you have to go out and find those guys, but every team has to go out and find those guys.
Who knows? You know what I mean? Like, there was a time, I would say for the first decade of his career, everybody thought Tom Brady was overrated. Why? Because statistically, he wasn't dominant, but he just kept winning Super Bowls. So he became this talk of being great. You know, I remember vividly, there was a very big thought amongst Colts fans of, it's ridiculous Tom Brady is put on Peyton Manning's level. Peyton
true.
Manning wins MVPs. It's not his fault he doesn't have Bill Belichick. That existed for a majority of Tom Brady's career.
Yes.
When it changed was 2007, when Tom Brady suddenly said, I'm going to throw for 40-plus touchdowns every single season. Right? It's like he hit a new level of himself. He got unlocked. Can Brock do that? Absolutely. Like, I think Brock has shown enough of the cerebral part of the game. He could become one of those like true field generals where he's almost scheme proof because he's so smart, he can beat any of it. And that's what Tom Brady reached. He was scheme proof because it doesn't matter what you throw at him. He's seen it and he's smart enough to recall things that happened 15 years ago. Oh, I remember seeing that coverage from this guy who was an assistant at that time 15 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, I think Brock is somebody that's that smart. I mean, look at what Sam Darnold said about who he credits for teaching him how to be a quarterback. He said Brock Purdy.
Yeah, he did. He gave credit
Brock
to Brock.
Purdy taught him how to prepare as a quarterback, showed him the way of being ready and always prepped and film study and all that stuff. So Brock Purdy does have the capability of reaching that level. Do I think that he's ever going to be better than he was 2 years ago? I don't think that he truly has an MVP within him. I think that would take extreme circumstances, and pretty much all of those circumstances lined up a couple of years ago. it takes a very big down year for quarterbacks. Like this year, if Brock Purdy had the year from 2 years ago, this past season, he wouldn't even made top 5 MVP.
Right.
Maybe not even top 10, because you had Burrow, you had Jackson, you had Josh Allen that were clearly above him. I don't know that he can have a better year in terms of MVP voting and statistically in terms of efficiency than he did 2 years ago. But if you take the average between the last 2 years, I think, yeah, he'll be better than that overall.
Let's listen to a little bit more of Dan Patrick.
He's played well, obviously.
Yes.
But I don't know what that part of the skill set is that it's like, can't lose that. Can't lose that. You know what I mean? That Brock Purdy has. If you're talking about Lamar Jackson, you're like, all right, pay that dude. I get it. 100%. Look at what he's doing. There's a million other quarterbacks, so maybe not a million, but many other quarterbacks that you're like, obviously pay him. I don't know what Brock Purdy has that is that thing that you put your finger on that says, like, we absolutely cannot lose that. Give him his money.
And his might be intangibles, because my source, who's a scout, said he can't make those throws to the numbers. Like that's not his strength. And you have to be able to make those throws. Now, if you don't have those receivers who can create some separation, that makes it a lot more difficult for Brock Purdy to lead your team. If McCaffrey is not McCaffrey.
Hold on. The stuff about the not being able to throw to the numbers, like, I agree that Brock doesn't have the strongest arm, but I disagree with that scout's assessment. I've seen Brock throw outside the numbers.
Look, it pains me to say, because Dan Patrick, for pretty much my entire childhood, was my favorite. He was my favorite on SportsCenter. I used to watch his show or listen to his show when he split from ESPN. I think he's gone the way of Cowherd. He's ill-informed and he just makes up crap.
Well, he's relaying something that a scout told to him. So I'm not denying that, maybe he knows somebody, a scout that told him.
Yeah, a former New York Jets scout.
But Brad Graham is now, in response to this, tweeting out throws for Brock.
Yeah, from the far hash.
Yep.
Throwing 15 yards down the field.
That's great. And yeah, multiple times he's doing it.
Far hash again, about 10 yards down the field. For those listening to the podcast, it's clips from the All 22 that Brad is posting.
And I want to be clear. Does he have the most zip on those passes that anybody, in the league does? No, maybe he doesn't get there as quickly.
He has more zip on those passes than Jimmy Garoppolo ever had. I'll put it that way.
Well, even regardless of that, it gets there. It's not intercepted. He's able to complete the pass. He's tall enough to ride the bumper cars, and that's all that matters.
And that's a tight window. The second one, there's a defender right behind him. Almost, the defender is close enough that the defender thought they were going to be able to deflect it. Mm-hmm. The defender went and undercut the route, thinking they were going to be able to get to the ball, and it was fast enough that he got past him and got right to Aiyuk.
I shout out to Brad Graham for doing yeoman's work right there. But yeah, so I agree that it's not the fastest, it's not the strongest arm in the world, but it's good enough. So for a scout should know better. Like, you can watch the tape. We just showed some examples there. There are not examples of where Brock is trying to throw a ball to the sideline and it's accurate and it's on time, but he just doesn't have the arm strength and it's getting picked off and taken back to the house. We don't have those. Those aren't the interceptions that Brock Purdy throws. He throws much dumber interceptions that drive you crazy, but he's not throwing. When we look at Brock's interceptions, it's not because, well, it's a perfect ball and it's on time, but it's just not hard enough. Like, no, that's not the reality.
No, his interceptions are overconfidence.
Right.
It's a tight window. I can fit it in there.
I agree.
His interceptions are the Brett Favre interceptions. Put it that way. They're why are you throwing that? Like, yeah, there was a split second where there was a tiny bit of a window, but there's two guys there. So it got closed up.
So anyway, I just saw Brad posting about that clip, so I wanted to throw it in there because I figured if Brad's response was to immediately post film clips, then Dan must have said something that riled him up. So I just wanted to drop that in there. So anyway, we've gone a little long, but I thought it was worth getting in. Was there anything else from Jed or from Kyle that you wanted to respond to?
No, I can sum up those two interviews very succinctly. Kyle was honest. Jed York was not.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that, quite frankly. Kyle usually is honest. For the most part, he usually is. And Jed is going to be Jed because he's
okay, Lombardi.
Jed is going to be what he is. He's going to say what he needs to say to make himself look as good as possible because Jed just wants to be loved. He wants to be looked at like Eddie DeBartolo. That's why he always mentions his uncle every time he has a friggin' media session. And so he's going to try and just, get the cool kids to like him because that's who Jed is. And so now we wait. The draft is Emmitt Smith days away, Levin. You like that?
Is it really 22 days?
Yeah, 22 days away.
I honestly was thinking it was closer than that, to be honest with you.
I'm a big countdown guy. You know that. So I love it. They always do it when I'm hosting at ESPN. They always have the big voice come on. We're 22 days away from the NFL draft.
I'm the opposite. I don't want it sitting there weighing on my mind. If I'm counting down, I'll be thinking, oh, it's 21 days. And a couple hours later, 21 days. Oh, it's midnight, 20 days. That's how my brain works. I sit and I go, I know it's somewhere around the end of April on a Thursday is the first round, but I don't sit and go, oh, how close are we? Until we get like the week of, it's like, all right, now it's in, it's kind of like hitting the activation button in my brain for, all right, now I will give resources of my brain towards that event.
I love it. I love countdowns, and I cannot wait for the draft. Obviously, we know all the reasons that this one is important. By the way, before we go, I just want to implore everyone, please go draft in the 49ers Media Madness bracket. We're down to the Elite Eight. Somehow I am still alive. I'm about to get destroyed, but if anyone would go and vote for me, I would really appreciate it. I would like to win. Yes, I am a prideful person, okay? It's my tournament. This is year 3 of the tournament. I've never come close to winning, not anywhere even remotely possible. I'm in the Elite Eight. Please go and vote for me. Today's the last day. So
who are you facing again? I'm trying to remember.
I think it's Mayoko, which is,
I don't think it is. I'll say this. I looked, let's see, before I'm on night, so I went to sleep at 7 o'clock and I looked and you were ahead by a good bit. I think Mayoko is the matchup below you, though. No, Barrows is the matchup below you.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Mayoko. I know it's an uphill battle. I don't know.
Well, if it's Mayoko, for those of you listening, please go vote for Mayoko. Because I don't want to have to hear Rob brag and have his ego here. And I would rather have him sit here and be a loser like me.
Hey, some of us got eliminated in round 1. Some of us are still alive. That's how we're different.
I am unique amongst the gold standard podcast hosts. I am the only one that lost round 1.
That is true. Yeah, there's the bracket. It's me and
But you put me against Jordan Elliott, who's still alive at this point.
Jordan Elliott, I'm not going to lie. I didn't think he was going to make as good of a run as he made when I saw it come out.
Think about how many, like, not only does he do good work that's unique, it's not just beat reporting, but he did Niners Nation. Now he's at NBC Sports. Like, he's tied to a lot of the bigger organizations. He has fans and followers of multiple of the bigger websites that know of him and liked what he did.
Here's the other part of this, and I'm just going to say it out loud. Jason Aponte is still alive too. I can't have another member of the Gold Standard team go further in this tournament than me. That would be weird, right? Come on, people.
I will say this. You were ahead when I looked. Jason and Brad Graham were 1 vote apart from each other.
Ooh, so today is the last day. I will drop a link in the description on YouTube and in the podcast to go and vote. It's 1 vote per person now. We had to change it after everything that happened last round. So please go and get your vote in. I'm begging you. Please do it. I would like to win one of these things, or at the very least, go further than Jason Aponte. I lost a bet to him about Brandon Aiyuk getting traded, so now I have to wear a Yankees hat during part of the draft, which I'm not pleased about. So I need a victory over Jason. Please, people, help me out.
I will say this. If you're concerned about logging in, it doesn't tell us who voted for what. Like, I can't go in and be like, ooh, look who this person voted for. It just forces you to log in to ensure that you're limited to 1 response because of what happened previously.
So please go and check that out as it winds down. Like and subscribe to the channel as well. If this is your first time watching, welcome. Please come back. We're live every single weekday. Levin, thank you very much for joining me.
Yeah, and if you don't like the guy that's sitting here next to me, tune in on Tuesdays because he's not on that show.
Thanks for that.